So I'll just introduce you. Yeah, we'll get started. Thank you guys for coming to our industry spotlight. My name is Shannon Osborne. I do the external relations here in the department, and I'm really pleased to welcome today Shiksha Rai, who is a project manager at UHN and now working in the healthcare space. She's a mechanical engineering grad who started out, I think Bombardier was your first role, and has worked in a few other, I think, maybe more traditional engineering roles, and has now found her way into the healthcare system, and is going to share with us a little bit about her career path and how she's making a difference there, and answer some questions. I think you said you're pretty open to dialogue, so
for sure.
Jump in, ask questions. It's really wonderful of her to kind of give up some time today and come in and talk to you guys. I know you said you've benefited from some great mentors in your career thus far, so I hope you guys will take advantage of her expertise and her being here. And anybody who's just joined us, grab some pizza, grab a seat, and welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. So hi everyone, my name is Shiksha, and as Shannon mentioned, I'm currently a project manager at UHN. So I thought, the way I intended this session to be is more of a dialogue. So I'll start off with my background, and I'll tell you about my journey so far, and then I would love to hear from you guys, and really see and really talk about the things that that you're going through, and maybe some of the challenges you've faced, and if you have any questions. Okay. So in order to give a background for myself, I kind of thought about, like, instead of writing everything down, I thought of the big things that have happened in my life that have shaped me to be who I am. So as I mentioned, I was born in India. I lived there for the first 13 years of my life. I then moved to Canada, so I did my high school, undergrad, and stuff here. I'm 28 years old. I got married 4 years ago, so that's me and my husband there. I graduated in 2014, so I actually ended up marrying fairly early. And in terms of my career, I started working at Bombardier Aerospace. So this was after third year in my PEY. So I don't know if some of the master students or PhD students have done their undergrad here. PEY is like the co-op program that U of T offers. And for me, it had a profound experience on my life. It really, if I look back, it's one of the blessings that I had in my life that really put me on the path of being able to live a life that I'm happy about. And it changed me personally, it changed me professionally. Cannot talk more about my experience there, and later on, if you want, I can give you a bit more detail. So when I was at Bombardier, I worked on traditional mechanical things. So I worked on the boiler plant, I worked on the chiller plant, I worked on providing mechanical services to that time global 5,000, 6,000 aircrafts. So Bombardier Aerospace, the Downsview, which is in North York, is actually an aircraft assembly site. It's not a manufacturing site. So when we assemble the aircrafts, you need a lot of the mechanical systems coming in to actually test and make sure that they are all assembled, and then once they're assembled, they fly to Montreal. So you have to make sure that they are actually assembled well, otherwise, we did have an incident once when an aircraft did actually catch on fire.
Oh no!
Yeah, while in transit to Montreal. So did that for a year and a half, and then once I came back to finish up my fourth year, there were talks of me going back to Bombardier. I was thinking about doing a master's, and I was also thinking, okay, maybe I should do something else, So around that April of 2014, I decided that I didn't want to do my master's at that point. I wanted to get some more work experience. So I had an offer from UPS Supply Chain Solutions, and this was based out in Burlington, and it looked after handling logistics of pharmaceutical products all across North America. Plus, also the added advantage for me was I was offered a plant engineering supervisor role. That meant I was going to handle a team. I would have to look after, the chiller and boiler plant and typical mechanical engineering stuff, but also really look at the supply chain. So I thought, okay, this seems like a great opportunity, and I think I'm going to go for it. So I worked partly in US and also in Canada. and I looked after the supply chain, the distribution of almost all of the pharmaceutical companies you can think of, like Pfizer, GSK, which I ended up working for them later, Eli Lilly, Amgen, Johnson & Johnson, Guthy-Renker, all of them. And at the end of the 2-year mark, I was kind of getting bored. You know, I was like, okay, like all of the companies have sort of this same like supply chain. So it was same projects going on. And I was pretty comfortable with my team. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I think I've learned, you know, how to deal with a small team. And I like in the next 5 years, if I stay here, I'm not really gonna accumulate more incremental skills. So at the 2-year mark, I'm like, okay, let's see what's out there in the market. So in 2016, I found out that GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, it's a pharmaceutical company. It has some footprint in Canada, but obviously they have a far larger footprint in Europe because it's also a British pharmaceutical company. They were looking for hiring people for something called the Future Leader Program, which is basically a rotational program, like a leadership rotational program that fast tracks you into management or like senior management. So one tip I would give you is when you're applying for roles, look for these programs. Look for, like, they're generally called like graduate training program, engineering training program, future leader. A lot of the people use the future leader term. So look for these sort of like programs in companies, and I know most of the big companies offer this, because that's a great way for you to know if you actually want to stay in this industry or not. So I found like when I was interviewing for the role, so it was the first time they were launching in Canada, there were I think 500 to 550 applicants and one role. So I went through 9 interviews. It was a fairly long process. Interviewed with them for 3 months. Went through their like personality assessments and then wrote an engineering exam also, which was not fun because I did not remember a lot of the things. But I ended up getting the role, so I was very happy about that. And then when I was in GSK, I worked on managing. So I managed a team of 16 people, doing maintenance on like equipment that makes life-saving drugs. So my sort of expertise was in the area of the equipment that made HIV drugs, malaria, antidepressants, and things like that. And then at the end of like near the end of my rotation, so this was last year, I was kind of, you know, I just felt like I could be doing more with my life. I did enjoy a good career there. You know, one thing about pharmaceutical, at least in the Canadian or the North American market, is they pay really well. They have a great bonus structure. Like, I'm not going to name the products, but a lot of the products we all use are made for 60 to 80 cents, and I know GSK, a few other companies would sell it for like 35, 40 bucks. So you can imagine the profit margin is huge. And that kind of benefits everyone who works on it. So, you know, I was earning great, you know, and I got to travel. I got to travel to Europe, Asia, South America for different projects. So I was like, okay, in terms of my career, it seems nice, but I just feel like I could be doing more. And personally, at this time, my husband had graduated from med school. He did engineering science here, and then worked as an engineer for 2 years, and then decided he wants to do med school. So he was now, finishing up med school, and he was doing radiation oncology, which basically treats cancer. And even when I was talking to him, like both of us were kind of in the healthcare field, and we're like, you know what? Like we both have these engineering degrees that like are not as prevalent in healthcare, but there's such a good transition. Like there's so many things you can be doing with your degree in healthcare, and you just don't see that. And maybe we should do something about it, because that's obviously something that we are passionate about. And we actually started to work on sleep apnea. So for instance, my dad suffered from sleep apnea all through his life, and I saw him like go through doctors and go through the sleep studies, And it took him 5 years to be properly diagnosed with sleep apnea, which in a country as advanced as Canada is ridiculous. Like, this is something that, like, you have to sleep every day, and this is affecting your sleep every single day, and you're not able to diagnose it. So we actually started working on a low-cost sleep apnea device, which is still in sort of its infancy stage. Our device is 1/10 the cost of the next sort of competitor, and we are now seeing the struggles of, you know, trying to really, trying to take it to the next step. You know, we're starting the patient trials now, and I can't even tell you how much paperwork and work there is. And there's no one else in this market to guide us, because, you know, not a lot of engineers come into healthcare. If they do, they're probably doing research on a very, very specific areas. We don't have a lot of people working on sort of big issues that impact a larger section of the society, but are not looked at because they're not life critical. So that's happening in the background. So I just decided, like, you know, like, working in pharmaceutical, I didn't really agree with a lot of the ethics. As I said, you know, the profit margins are crazy. I'm working on the sleep apnea device on the side. So I'm like, maybe, you know, I should try and branch out and see where I can apply my skills. So I applied at UHN. I didn't get the first job I applied for, but then I think I applied to like 10 to 15 jobs here. I'm just gonna keep applying till the time someone decides to take a chance on me. So I got lucky that, you know, someone decided to take a chance on me. The project that I'm currently working on is looking at basically the cost. So UHN, do you guys know what UHN is? Right? Some of you? Okay, so I'll tell you. UHN stands for University Health Network. It consists of 4 big hospitals. So when you get out of the Queen's Park subway station, you'll see TGH, which is the Toronto General Hospital. On the other side, there is Princess Margaret, there is Toronto Rehab, there is Toronto Western, which is near the Kensington Market, and a few other smaller sites. So 8 sites or 8 hospital institutions come together and make UHN. And UHN together as a whole spends $2.2 billion every year. So that's either procuring medical devices, paying for doctors, nurses, and stuff like that. So my job is, I work in kind of the strategy area, and my mandate is to save 1 to 2% out of that $2.2 billion. So really looking to save somewhere between, you know, $15 to $24 million. And that's through different strategic projects. And at this point, what I do is I use my knowledge of engineering, because I've had experience, you know, in the typical engineering systems. So I use my knowledge of that when I'm dealing with the infrastructure department, the people skills that I gathered at UPS, I use, you know, when I'm talking to the nurses and the doctors, and then just my general, you know, like what I've seen at GSK in the pharmaceutical industry, I use that when I negotiate deals with the pharmaceutical companies about what price we will buy the drugs on. So I think at this point in my life, you know, I'm pretty clear that I want to stay in healthcare. You know, I'm pretty passionate about that, working on it in my personal time and also in my professional time. And then outside of work, you know, I do like mentoring students. So I do mentor a few students here at U of T and a few students at University of Guelph. And then I do like, I use the word connecting with others, but really it's about connecting with people from different backgrounds, because I think that's really helped me become the person I am. And like, you know, spending time here with you guys are the future. So, you know, I'd love to hear, you know, like, what are your thoughts? What are the things that are, you know, on your mind, so that I can maybe learn from you. Okay, so I think I've talked for too long. So I'm gonna take a pause here and maybe see if you guys have any questions.
Is anybody applying at any hospitals right now? Is that a goal workplace that you'd like to end up in when you're done your degree? Did you come just for pizza today?
What has been your experience with mentoring? Like, your experience with mentorship, not mentoring students, I'm pretty sure you had mentors yourself.
Yeah.
How did that process work? Like, how do you, as in everything from choosing a mentor to how the dynamics of the relationship works and how it has benefited you, if you could talk to that.
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't even realize I first got my mentor at Bombardier. At that time, I didn't really think about it as mentorship, but when I look back, it really was. So my experience, my general experience with mentorship is, if you're a mentee, you have to understand that you may be putting a lot more effort and time compared to your mentor initially, and you kind of have to be okay with that, because they probably have very busy schedules. So if they're not getting back to you, it's not because they don't want to, they probably are busy. So initially it's an unequal process where you have to give a lot more of yourself in order to get some advice. So I noticed that if you don't have that expectation set initially, not a lot of the mentor-mentee relationships work out, right? And the other thing is, you can't have one mentor for all your problems and all of your things, right? Like, for instance, my mentor from Bombardier, I talked to him about my career. So I sort of only talk to him about my career, and I don't really talk to him much about my personal life. Not because I don't want to, but it's just like we've set up that kind of relationship where I feel like it's the best use of his time and it's the best use of my time. Whereas some of the people, say from GSK, I talk to them more about, say, like how I want to develop, you know, what are the areas that I want to develop in personally. And I don't really seek sort of their career advice, but I do seek, like, okay, you know what, I'm trying this out and I have noticed a change. Do you have any feedback for me? So I find that's been a bit easier, and obviously this was a journey, right? There were some mentors that I was told to connect with, like they were like, Shiksha, you should, I think, connect with these people. And when I connected with them, I realized, you know what, it's not aligning. You know, the kind of mentees they're seeking and the kind of mentor I want is not. Like, for instance, I had one mentor. She had worked in the healthcare field for 30 years, so someone had said, you know what, maybe you should reach out. And I kind of felt, okay, maybe I should just reach out because someone has told me to. And I met with her 4 times, and all those 4 times were horrible because she didn't let me talk. She just spoke. And she just spoke for the full hour. So I think she was just looking to, like, fill her sort of checklist that she has a mentee. But I was looking for someone to give me real advice, and that didn't really work out for me. So I just told her, I'm like, listen, I don't think this is going to work. And obviously she didn't take it to it kindly, but I just didn't want to waste my time. So it's been a journey.
So mentorship, I think both me and Hamid are both thinking of looking for mentors, possibly. Not necessarily in the academic sense, but just like you say, in career sense and all that. And it's, I guess we're not sure how we are able to get those connections. Like you said, some people will say, oh, you should connect to this and all that.
Yeah.
But there's no one, at least thus far, suggesting mentors to us. So if we're going to reach out on our own, how do you suggest we do that?
So which field are you guys in? So
Like industrial engineering and healthcare, like an intersection of both.
So one thing I would say is talk to your professors. I feel like that's a good way. And it doesn't have to be the professors you work with directly. It could be people just in the faculty, because a lot of professors are in touch with a lot of big companies and also research institutes, and they know a lot of people. So that is one way, just to ask for a few names or maybe an email introduction. If that's not working out, I mean, you're at U of T, which is in the heart of downtown. There are a lot of events that happen pertaining to any field you're in. Like when I walk through Mars, like there are events happening for like everything and anything I can think of. So try going to those events and really meeting people through that. The third thing I would say is reach out on LinkedIn, right? So I'm very good at stalking people on LinkedIn. like I'll be like, this industry, like this is the company, like I've done this before, like where I was like, okay, which is the company I want to work at? Okay, I want to work, say, at UHN. Okay, let's go on LinkedIn, see which people are working at UHN, which of my connections know people, and then I go in there, and then I see like, okay, they've done this, and then most of the times I can figure out their email, because it's generally your first name, last name at UHN or whatever it is, and it has worked for me. And I just blast them an email like, hey, this is me. And sometimes you don't hear, which is okay, but if you do it 50 times or 10 times, you're probably going to hear once or twice, right? Like the thing is, you're looking for something, right? So you have to like be out there and make your sort of need or request be known. And you know, the people who don't reply, that's okay. They're probably, you know, busy with their life. But I've noticed that most people do reply all the time, me, sorry, Shiksha, I'm busy right now. Or they'd be like, okay, maybe I am not the best person, but I have someone here. Like very rarely have I heard a solid no. Right?
Okay, thank you.
There is the Engineering Connect platform,
Yes,
which is how we
yes,
had
yes.
Shiksha had even heard to come in here, and that offers the alumni mentorship program on it. And so the Connect platform, for you guys who are not aware, is our engineering, essentially a social, similar to a social networking platform. A lot of people will sign in using their LinkedIn profile, and so it's professionally driven. It's for students and alumni, but when our alumni sign up, they have the option to indicate whether or not they are willing to help. So you can actually click on any alumni profile and it will tell you whether or not they are willing maybe to be a mentor, to open doors in their company, to meet for a chat. And then many of them have signed up for the alumni mentorship program, where once you're in that group, you can search more thoroughly all the profiles, and our students will then choose who they want to match with.
Okay.
So years ago, the program used to be set up where mentors and mentees would fill things out and try, and there was an alumni volunteer who would go and match everybody, and they would say, you two should be a good match, or you would be a good match. And then some of those relationships worked really well, and some of them just kind of fizzled. The fit wasn't there. So more recently, we've left it more open, and we've had students self-direct. And so now students are choosing which alumni they would like to get matched with. So we've had some alumni who don't get chosen at all, and we've had some who maybe have 2 or 3 students who are interested in hearing from them. And even though it's a bit more imbalanced, the relationships are actually a lot stronger, because the students, you've done a bit more of the legwork to look through their profiles and say, well, that job looks really interesting. Like you did this particular path. Why did you do that? Oh, you went to grad school. Let's talk about that, how that worked, why they made certain decisions. So it's an excellent resource to tap into as well.
Absolutely.
Shannon, is there like a general rule of how many mentors someone should have? Like, is it like how many, ideally speaking, how many mentors should you ideally speaking have? Like, of course, everybody's circumstances are different. Like, but is there a thing like having too many, or?
I think the risk with having too many would be, are you putting in the effort with the individual relationships in that sense?
Okay.
Yeah, and I know with a lot of students, you don't always have a set idea of where you want to go. Like maybe you've come today because this sounds interesting. Maybe you're here because you definitely want to work in healthcare, or maybe it's just like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I want to do that. And you might listen to this talk today and be really inspired and absolutely want to go into healthcare, or you might leave and think, good for her, not for me, I want to do something else, and that's actually really valuable too. So I would say more than 2 or 3 people, if you're talking to them, you're probably not having as deep or valuable conversations. But if you can be, more than one is nice, because it does give you a different perspective. But I think the real thing there is putting in the effort and having the conversations and listening to their path.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I just ask a bit about your graduate studies, about why did you decide to go to US instead of staying in Canada?
Oh yeah, sure. So what happened was when I was working at UPS, I was traveling a lot to California because that's where my boss was. And looking at supply chain, it's, I really didn't appreciate supply chain before. And I just thought, like, what is it? It's just moving like one thing to like another place. How can it be so hard? And then I realized, oh man, like there's just so much data, and there's so many different ways to optimize that I felt like I didn't have enough knowledge when I was working on some of the more extensive projects. So I decided to apply at Stanford. I was lucky that I got in, and I was doing Masters in Management Science and Engineering, which is what they call industrial engineering there. So it's actually the same thing. I was doing that when I was working with UPS, and I was very glad that they were funding it. And I was also not being charged any extra premium, even though I was a Canadian resident. So I'm like, okay, great, the company's paying for it, and I'm getting to learn all of this new information that I can apply to my work. But what happened was, after 4 courses, they were all very engineering intensive courses, I actually decided to leave UPS. And then I'd asked GSK up front, like, are you going to fund this? And they said, yes, we will. So then I ended up continuing and doing more courses. And at GSK, I felt like it wasn't really aligning to what I was doing there, because it was like engineering risk analysis, quantitative risk analysis, like supply chain, and then I also had to do Python in that. So I'm like, okay, this is not completely aligning. So I have 1 course left. It's not really a course, but it's kind of a project that I've deferred because it's working at UHN. You know, when I went from GSK to UHN, like, it went from private to public sector. You know, I am following my passion, but it also means I did take a huge pay cut to come and work for UHN. And UHN will not fund my course. I just, right now, I don't know if I want to go in and just complete that project. But this is life, you know. Some things like maybe 5 years ago, I really thought this is what I want to do, and I pursued it as far as I could. And then I'm at a point where, okay, if I have time, I'll do it, and if I don't have time, I'm not going to do it and not really have regrets. But life happens, you know. Yeah. Hi.
What sort of hardship did you face while switching the streams? Because I see in many companies they ask the relevant background, study or work experience.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Bang on.
Like you're completely from engineering background and now you're working for some healthcare industry.
Yeah.
So what kind of hardship did you face, and what are the expectations of those companies while choosing an engineering background student? Like what are the expectations?
So one thing is, engineering degree always carries value. Like, whenever I tell someone I'm an engineer, I find that people tend to respect me. That doesn't mean they'll hire me, but generally it means that they do respect me. So I think I've been able to switch careers. I think someone mentioned here being resilient. Like, I think it's you who mentioned, right? Like, that's been fundamental. It's not what knowledge I have or, you know, how good of a work I do. For me, it's been being basically resilient. Like, I don't take no for an answer as my dead end. Like, when I was at Bombardier, like that was a co-op. So, you know, it was a co-op, I had applied, that's how it was. Even when I went to work at UPS or GSK, it's before that I'd applied to maybe 50 different companies, right? And I applied to the things I thought were interesting, and not necessarily, oh, this is what I've done before, so I should be doing this. Like, I didn't let that sort of dictate my path. It was like, I want to do this. Okay, if you're saying no to me, then what do I need to do? Like, what do I need to do to be a viable employee for you, right? And that sometimes doesn't only mean being a good engineer. It means, like, you know, you have you have a good positive attitude, right? You're someone that the person can relate to. They can see that, you know, you're hardworking, you are honest, and you're really looking to learn. I feel like if you show those qualities, those are universal. They can take you anywhere, right? And after a point, like, I worked with so many engineers, and a lot of them haven't been able to succeed in their careers, even though they're at the right company, the right fit, but they're not able to succeed because they're not team players. They look down on other people who don't have engineering degrees. They're not able to communicate with people who don't come from their background. and that's the hindrance for them, and that's why maybe they find it a bit difficult. But if you're someone who is open to change, doesn't get bogged down by no's, because sometimes you're not in the right place at the right time. That's also something that's out of your control, right? You may think you're the perfect candidate, you may think you have everything for that role, and you want to switch, but maybe it's just not the right time, right? So if you're able to understand that and then say, okay, maybe I'll apply after, or maybe I'll try again, maybe I'll go learn this and maybe it will help. So if you're open internally to different things, the job market is going to be open for you. And that's what worked for me. Like, coming from GSK to UHN, I applied 15 times, like 15 different roles, right? And I would ask people, like, when I went for my first interview, they said, we really liked you, but we just didn't take you because you told us your salary and it's far more than what we can offer you, and we already have someone internal who would love this role, so really sorry, but maybe next time. I said, that's fine. Can I add you on LinkedIn? She said, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, okay, great. You know what? Next time if something comes up, please let me know, and I'm okay to take a pay cut. Right? And then she did actually come back, and that's the person that I'm actually working for. So I could have ended that conversation just saying thank you, or I just took it as say, okay, it's no for now, but it's not no forever. Right? Make sense? Yeah. First I'll take.
You go first.
Okay.
Thank you, Shiksha, for sharing. I just have one question. So what do you think is a valuable skill set for a student to acquire before going into the industry? Because I myself, I don't have any work experience.
That's okay.
I'm just preparing for finding a job, and I want to hear from someone who's experienced about skill sets.
Okay. Just so that I can tailor my answer to you. So you're a master's student, right?
Master's student.
First year, second year?
Second year.
Second year master's students. Okay. And what are you doing your master's in?
Industrial engineering.
Industrial engineering. Okay. But I think what I give as an advice is going to apply, and actually have a slide on that. I'll move forward. Right. So obviously I thought about this from before, and which is why I have it. So I'll talk a little bit about the tips, but generally in terms of getting ready, as you're gonna apply for jobs, I would say is before you start applying, really think and do your research about where you want to be, right? I know, like, when you're in school, you're like, oh, I just hope I get a job, right? Like, that's all you care about. And then you'll notice, sorry, I'll move back past me. And then when you notice, like, I've been offered a few roles, like I've turned down 4 different jobs up till now at this point. They were better salary, they were good environment, but they were just not a good fit for me. So that's something I think it's better to think from before, like when you're in school, as to what you want to do. Otherwise, you just, you may end up at a role which you don't really like. But for tips for applying, or how to apply, first thing, as I said, like, narrow down your search, like figure out which industry you want to be, and maybe you can find that out by looking at people who are doing those roles. I get a lot of LinkedIn requests saying, this is my resume, do you have a job? Right? And as great as they may be, like, that's not really a positive point for me to open up that email, look through that resume and match. But instead, if someone comes to me, it's like, hi Shiksha, I saw that you've worked here in your profile, love to chat with you about it. I'm far more open to that, right? So reach out to people on LinkedIn for the roles you think, this would be interesting, and just ask them, hey, just wondering if you have time for a call or a coffee, would love to hear more about your role. And if they say no, be like, okay, that's fine. Is there someone else that you recommend? So they may recommend someone a bit junior to them. You'll be surprised, as I said before, like, not many people will be like, no, I do not want to meet you. Like, I've rarely gotten that. So people are looking to talk, but if you phrase a question in a way that that doesn't talk about what's in it for me. It's only all about you. People may not be willing. The second thing is you talked about not having a lot of work experience, which is fine. It's really it may be more of a hindrance, I think, when internally than it is on your resume, because I'm sure you've done courses, I'm sure you've done different projects or things outside of school that are related to your field or have given you skills that you have learned, right? So if you've done courses with projects, talk about those. If you have participated in competitions and if won something, talk about that. There are many different things you can write in your resume, and not all of it has to relate to your role. Like when I went from GSK to UHM, like private to public, going from like hardcore engineering roles to something in strategy, there wasn't a lot of connection, right, on paper. But I was able to add some keywords from the jobs they were looking into my resume so that it tells them the story of, okay, these are the things I've done. I know it's not completely related to your role, but it's giving me the skills that I can apply to your role. Okay? And then one thing I would say, when you're applying, get your resume edited, because the first stop to your resume is actually HR. And HR are not going to understand the technical terms, right? So get your resume edited. I worked at U of T Career Center when I was in my undergrad, and that really helped shape my resume up. And I feel like they're a fantastic resource. Just go to them and get their feedback. You may not agree with everything, but I think they have some very good points to give. Just so that you get a non-technical view on your resume, because if HR is looking at it and all they see is some very detailed things that are not relating to the job, they're not going to send your resume to the manager, right? And then one thing I'll tell you, when you go to interviews, there's something called the STAR method. I've talked about it before. So how many of you know the STAR method? Okay, some of you do. So STAR is situation, T is for task, A is for action, R is for result. So when you're either talking to, say, a potential mentor, or you're talking to someone who can potentially offer you a job, or you're at an interview, always structure your answers in the STAR format. So if I have to talk about a project I've done, I'm going to talk about the situation. So what was the situation? What was I doing, right? Or what was the project? And then task is, what was my work in that project? And then action is, what did I do in that project? Some of the key things that I did that resulted in something, which is R. So all of that combined becomes STAR, and it's a very easy way for the other person, without having much background, understanding what you're trying to talk about. I've interviewed a lot of people, and actually I've hired 4 summer students and 2-3 junior engineers, and all of my summer students were in second year, third year undergrad with not a lot of work experience. But I hired them because they were able to communicate with me in a way that I understood, and I saw their thought process, and that's what I was like, okay, this is a person I can work with, instead of only focusing in on, these are the skills they have right now, and this is what I need. If this is not a direct match, then I'm not going to hire them. That's how some people think, but I think more and more I talk to people, that's not how people are. People are looking like, okay, this is what they know, this is how I can build on this person, and this is the skills that they can bring in. So STAR method really helps in that. It's never failed me. What I see is when I talk about they'll ask you, what's your biggest accomplishment? What is a conflict you've dealt with? They'll ask you questions like that, and when I phrase it in STAR, it makes them delve more into my answer, which makes them remember me. So it's a technique that has worked for countless people, including myself, and I can't emphasize it enough. And then, as I said before, I don't take no as a final dead end. So if they're like, Shiksha, sorry, you don't get this role, I'm like, okay, can I add you on LinkedIn, right? And then next time if there's a role there, I ask them, can I use you as a reference? And then once I add their name into the application, your resume automatically goes in a different pile, right? Because you now have an internal company reference. So these are just ways to increase your odds of landing an interview. And then once you land an interview, you know, you have to give it your best. STAR is one way, but you know, other thing is just being professional. And then those things are going to increase your chances of, you know, being in a role that you like. Did that help? Yeah?
Thank you.
So your roles at Bombardier, UPS, and GSK, were they? I'm assuming they were some combination of core, typical engineering analysis as well as managing teams. Was it more heavily on one or the other?
Bombardier.
I'm just gonna jump in really quick. I think you have another slide that might actually look a little bit at your career journey, and I'm just looking at the time. We have about 10 minutes left, so I don't know if the answer can match into the other slide, the one with the chart on it.
Yeah.
That one I feel like might talk a little bit to how you
I
do
didn't wanna
different
talk-
aspects of your
Alright,
career.
Yeah, I'll make my question as succinct as possible. So, so quickly, were you like handling teams, or was it more technical engineering analysis?
So initially, Bombardier was all technical. I would say UPS was 30% managing people, 60% my own engineering work. GSK, again, because I was in this like future leader program, they put equal emphasis on the technical expertise and also the management style, right? So that was probably a good split, 50-50. And now when I'm working at UHN, I would say I moved to strategy, so it's like me working independently, but it's using all of my technical expertise in trying to manage people and teams.
Okay, so my question is then, so having managed teams in diverse industries, are there like, you know, some fundamental metrics that make you a good team leader / project manager that you have learned over your career journey?
Yeah, and I
So,
think when I
yeah.
talk about my journey, I think this graph like completely explains it. So I would say like I'm here at this point where I kind of know what I want to do, but throughout my university and most of my career, I've been here where it's like I think I know what I'm doing, but really I have no idea what is happening. So I think in terms of like what it's okay, so it's your own experience in life. So I'll share, like I went through a pretty big health crisis last year and this year, so I'm okay now, but like that really gave me a lot of, like this is when I really thought about healthcare. It's like, you know what, like someone like me whose husband is a doctor is struggling to get medical attention, right? Like it just boggled my mind, like these are the things that are happening in Canada, right? So I gained more empathy, right? And having more empathy helps you connect with people more, right? And that you don't need a degree for that, right? Like having empathy, trying to really put yourself in someone else's shoes is going to make you connect with people and make your project either in your life or in basically your career far more successful. So I think like empathy is like number one for me, like regardless of what you're doing in your life, like if you're able to develop empathy, like you are going to be successful, right? So I would say that, and then as I said, putting yourself in other people's shoes. And this is also a journey, right? Like you go through life, like you try, like things happen to you that are out of your control, and then how you deal with hardships, how you deal with challenges, right? And the third thing is like when you walk out of your door, there are a lot of things that take energy away from you, right? And give you like negative energy. And it's up to you to try and change that and make it positive. Like when I talk about like one of my passions is to like connect with other people, it's because like I have so much fuel that gets used up in the day or in the month, because I'm also an extrovert, so I'm giving out a lot of energy, right? I need a few people, I need to talk to a few people who like replenish that and are able to feed me with some positive energy, and that makes me a better person, that makes me a better boss, that makes me a better employee, right? I know I don't have
I was gonna say maybe one more question. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
we
have a
can get
question
yours.
about your startup. So you're doing the
Yeah.
startup at the same time as your full-time job.
Yes.
How do you find managing that? And if you could go back, would you kind of have a different approach? Or do you think that it works as like a part-time thing on the side?
If I could go back, would I change it? Probably not. So it is stressful. So I obviously have my full-time job. I am doing this. I have aging parents, so that's also, that's something that takes my time. And in terms of managing it, what I've done is cut things that don't bring me joy, that don't I'm not trying to sound selfish, but really that don't serve my purpose. I've sort of cut those things out. I've cut I moved I'll be honest, some of my workplaces were very toxic environments, right? And I wasn't able to think my best, so I just moved. So I have done that so that the energy that I have during the day, I'm only focusing on these things. So right now my focus is my job, my focus is the sleep apnea, my focus is my parents, and a few personal things, and out of that I really don't do anything else. So now that I know these are the focuses of my life, this is all I'm doing, I find it easier to manage. Before I was all over the place, and I was doing things that really didn't add a lot of value, and we all have a engineering mind. It's okay, how can I efficiently lead my life? What am I doing on a daily basis that is a wastage? How can I remove that wastage and fill that up with value added work? So I did that analysis on my life, and then it's not that I balance it well. There's some days I'm a complete disaster. But
I would argue that. I think you're doing pretty.
As I told you,
well.
I'm moving. I don't have a place to go. Right now, I'm living from a suitcase in my in-laws and also my parents' place. So I'm trying to move right now. I live in Burlington, so commuting from Burlington to downtown has been a disaster. So I'm looking to find a place in downtown. And I say looking, and I've already leased my place in Burlington, so I don't really have a home, but I'm just trying to manage.
You can come sleep in the common room again.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I am going to close it there, and we have a small gift from the department
Oh, thank you so much.
for you in your transition phase, and thank you for coming in and sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you.
There is a group that's coming in for a 12 o'clock meeting, but I see we have some extra pizza if you would like to